and so on.
Do you get the impression, Mohammed, that this central bank, the Federal Reserve, has identified the kind of shifts that you've written about in this book?
I think they're getting there. I think they were in a world of deficient aggregate demand for a long time, including in 2021. Look at the monetary framework adopted in August of 2020, all about insufficient demand. I think there's a slow recognition that supply is much more of a problem now than demand is. But there's also an issue of mindset. The word mindset keeps on coming up in the book. You deal with people that come on your show that truly believe that just next week we're going to go back to the old world, where interest rates come down, where liquidity will be abundant. And what we try to point out in this book is that the last 15 years were extraordinary. In fact, the last structurally, as Mike often says, there is no new China. There is no new Eastern Europe coming on to the global market. Things are fundamentally changed. And one thing that I think the finance sector hasn't understood is that the liquidity regime going forward is very different from what we've lived in the last 15 years since the global financial crisis.
You helped coin the term together with the team at PIMCO, the new normal. Are we just going back to the old normal?
So the good news, if we would go back to the old normal, I think we're looking at a very uncertain future. You know, we're often asked, what does this mean for CEOs? And we tell them we have to think about a whole distribution of likely outcomes with very thick tails, very fat tails. This is not the old world of a normal distribution with thin tails. I mean, how often on your show do we talk about something we couldn't have imagined a few weeks earlier? It just shows you the sorts of world we're living in.
The moves in the bond market speak to that. I wanted to round things out by talking about the climate transition and perhaps identify what some people might call reality checks, Gordon. The Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, pushing back certain targets from 2030 to 2035. The strikes that we're seeing right now in Detroit speak to the difficulty of making this transition, perhaps overlooking the price that we might have to pay, particularly for Labour who want job guarantees. Are they reality checks for you?
I think what's happening is that climate change is becoming a political football. And I think if you take the British government's decision that they're going to roll back on some of their promises when we used to have an all-party consensus, it's all for electoral reasons. What I would like to see is cross-party cooperation to take a long view. Look, if one party's in power and another party's not in power, we've still got to make a decision about the future of electric cars. We've still got to make a decision about heat pumps in Britain. You've still got to make a decision about how quickly the transition is going to be done by companies like Ford and everybody else. So you do need people to get around a table to talk about this. You cannot actually leave it to one politician or one party for electoral advantage simply to make a decision one day and then it be reversed the next day. So we need a debate on what climate change means for each member of the public, and we need to have a plan that both parties in Britain and parties in other countries can agree on. And I think it's really important. All these long-term decisions are becoming the victim of, if you like, immediate political campaigning. And that's the big mistake we're making. These are long-term issues that have got to be resolved. I'm talking about how we can fund climate change in the poorest countries. So you've got mitigation and adaptation in Africa and elsewhere. For 14 years, we've been making promises to do something about it, and actually the money has not been forthcoming. I'm suggesting today, well, maybe start with the windfall oil and gas revenues and do something. But we've got to have a burden sharing that helps the poorest countries mitigate and adapt to climate change. And again, that's a long-term problem. Short-term political decisions won't solve it.
You've mentioned the pitfalls of electoral cycles. And one way of navigating that with central banks was to offer them independence. When you describe some of the pitfalls of democracies to deal with the environmental transmission, are you describing a feature of democracy or a bug?
Well, there's got to be, you know, vigorous debate. There's going to be argument. But I think you've got to get your politicians to focus on the long term and not the short term. Look, the reason we made the Bank of England independent was not because we thought it would be better fiscal, that it should separate fiscal and monetary policy. In fact, there should be better coordination. It was because we saw that politicians were making decisions purely for the short term. So you need that long-term view, and you will get politicians now, leaders now, that realize that they cannot win in politics unless they actually show people that they've got a vision for the times ahead. And we're trying to suggest, look, here are real problems that can be dealt with. Don't give up on it. Don't give up on the possibility of solving them. It can be done.
There's a word that's used at the very end of the book, and I might butcher the word. Is it kintsugi? Kintsugi? The art of Japanese pottery making, picking up the pieces? What is it, Gordon? What's that word?
I wouldn't be able to pronounce it better than you, so I leave it to your pronunciation. But we've got to bring things together. It's a simple point.
To the three of you, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me ask you about politics. You've been involved advising presidential candidates, and I presume presidents as well. Do you ever have any interest in serving in a senior position in the federal government or running for office?
Absolutely, unequivocally, no.
The aggravation factor isn't worth it?
It's the aggravation factor, but it's more importantly is I don't believe there's any integrity in it.
So you do give money to politicians, though, because that's the system, but you...
It's part of the game. I think, to be honest, I think there's a need for a multi-party system in the U.S. to give more people a choice about where they can throw their voter support and their political support, but also to cause the country to sort of come together by having everybody have a role in deciding what is in the long-term best interest of the country. I've often believed that Black Americans as a people and as a voting bloc should adopt the same position that the original founders of the Congressional Black Caucus had in early 1970. Their philosophy was enunciated like this: Black Americans should have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests.
You formed a partnership with Penny Pritzker at some point to do parking, is that right?
Yeah, so when I was working at JLL, that we went through this real estate recession in the early 90s, and the senior people at the firm said, let's do a retrospective on all these different asset classes to see what happened, how we overpaid, why we ran into so much trouble, what really happened in the marketplace. And when I did that, I recognized, wow, there were a lot of reasons why I liked the parking assets better than I did office and retail and industrial. And so I started really noodling on the differences between those asset classes and came up with a rationale to start a business in the parking space. Then I crossed paths with Penny Pritzker, who later became our Secretary of Commerce. And she liked the idea, and she and I went off on this adventure together and built a real estate operating company in the parking space.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
You can see the massive gains for the OG crypto coin.
The breakout we have all perhaps long awaited, finally realized. We'll see if it sticks.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto, the people.
There's no question this industry is composed of some bad actors and some good actors.
The transactions.
Volumes have surpassed $24 billion per day.
And the technology.
Stop talking about the technology, start demonstrating the utility.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays.
What's exciting is when you see where this company started, the tie. You see what it's become. It's all been driven by a consistent vision and actually a consistent purpose.
It started 56 years ago with a tie. Today, Ralph Lauren is one of the world's most iconic fashion brands, valued at more than $8 billion, with 500 stores around the globe. At the helm, a chief executive who came into the job 7 years ago, with no fashion experience, but a determination to return the brand to luxury, attracting younger, high-value customers.
When I started in this job, I often got the question, Patrice, is Ralph Lauren still relevant, right? Which is a painful question to listen to, honestly. But we had, to some extent, lost touch with that younger generation.
In this episode of Leaders with Lacroix, I speak to Patrice Louvet about the company's founder, Ralph Lauren, and Louvet's plans to take the company back to its roots. Patrice Louvet, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg.
Very happy to be here, Francine.
Do you have the best job in the world?
Pretty close.
Because it's fun. What was the most surprising thing about your job since you first started?
Oh, there's so many things. You know, probably the thing that actually attracted me to this opportunity is the opportunity to work with Ralph, right? This man is visionary, incredible entrepreneur, has had an amazing success around the world, and the opportunity to work with him, to partner with him, is really special, and I cherish it every day.
Yeah, and you have to get along because, of course, he's still such a figure. He has his name on the door.
He does have his name on the door.
So how much of it is his vision?
Well, it all starts with his vision, right? And what's exciting is when you see where this company started, the tie, you see what it's become. It's all been driven by a consistent vision and actually a consistent purpose. You and I talked this about our purpose is to inspire the dream of a better life through authenticity and timeless style. And that's been the driving force for the company now. And now we're around the world. We are well beyond ties. As you know, we're in hospitality. We have restaurants. We have coffee shops. We're in the women's business, the homes business, but all still driven by a very consistent vision and mission. And this is an industry that's very much about trends. And Ralph actually regularly says, I hate fashion because fashion comes and goes. And we talk a lot about style, timelessness, and an element of consistency. And I think that's served the company quite well over the past 50+ years.
And what was it like the first time you met him?
There was a moment that was incredibly special. So I got a chance to see him in his ranch in Colorado in Telluride.
Before you got the job or after?
Right after I got the job. So that's probably the most iconic moment for me, and I can also give you perspective on that first engagement. But we're in his ranch. We're outside, it's chilly, it's 8 in the morning next to the cookhouse, and we're looking ahead, and there's this beautiful mountain view. And we're talking about what business are we in, right? Because it was really important to be super clear together and have a consistent ambition. And we landed on the fact we're actually in the dreams business. A lot of people say, well, Ralph Lauren, you're in the apparel business, you're a fashion company. No, we would disagree with that.
So is it trust? Is he easy to work with?
He's wonderful to work with. There's always this image of, the creative leader in a fashion company can be challenging and complicated, and there's obviously been stories around that. But Ralph is an incredible partner. He is both an amazing visionary and a great businessman. I think that's been a key part of his success. We have been super clear on our respective roles, and although nothing is written on a piece of paper, we're clear on who's responsible for what and where we come together. And I couldn't be happier with the partnership.
I mean, Patrice, there was also a moment where you had to basically, change the company to get away from the department stores that lowered the ambition for the company. How hard was that?
From a financial standpoint, it's challenging. But if you go back to the roots of this company, this company was founded as a luxury company, right? And actually, the first tie that Ralph launched, he reminded me recently, was I think 2.5 times the price of a Christian Dior tie. Right, and I think no one would disagree that Christian Dior is an incredible luxury company. So we indeed had to significantly pull back, particularly in the US, our presence because the brand had been overextended. We reduced about 2/3 of our wholesale doors. But as I look now, we're about 2-3 years into that exercise. We're in a much stronger place. Our brand perception is much stronger. Our value perception is much stronger.
But the elevation journey, or this ultra luxury, at the time was not necessarily a given. Right now, when you look at luxury company, it's very clear that if you are in the ultra luxury space, you can increase prices. You have a lot more of a market around the world instead of this moderate luxury. What made you see that back then?
I think it's back to what this company stood for historically. And already at the time, I mean, this phenomenon has been going on for a while, that you see this bifurcation of luxury brands that have pricing power, that consumers see the value, and therefore you have the ability to increase your average unit retail, and others where it's just focused on selling product, not engaging the consumer in the same way, much more promotional. We felt like, as we go back to our roots, that's where we wanted to take the company.
I mean, how do you create that fortune? So how do you create those moments where people associate you with Wimbledon or some of the shows that they watch on TV that, again, elevates the luxury?
Yeah, it's a very holistic exercise. So it's not just one thing.
Is there one thing that you think works better than others? Is it the flagship stores that are very, have coffee shops and have a very distinct lifestyle that you think people are drawn to more than online?
Yeah, for us, the way we think about it, Francine, is 30 key cities around the world. So we actually don't really look at markets, we look at key cities. And each key city, we want to have a balanced ecosystem. Start with a flagship store that really is going to project the image. Our approach in China, for example, is very much driven by the city focus, establish a strong flagship, and then build the ecosystem around it. But I don't know that I can point to just one intervention. I think the transformation of our marketing and storytelling has also been quite effective, particularly at recruiting a younger consumer. That was one of our priorities when I started.
Which is the hardest, right?
Which is the hardest because they're fickle and
they change and
exactly, and there's obviously a lot of opportunities. And I remember when I started in this job, I often got the question, Patrice, is Ralph Lauren still relevant, right? Which is a painful question to listen to, honestly. But we had, to some extent, lost touch with that younger generation. And this company is 56 years old, and we expect to be here another 56 years from now. So critical to kind of rejuvenate our customer base. And we pivoted our marketing to be where that younger consumer is. Gaming, the types of sports activation that resonates with them, right? Styling the product differently. What's very interesting is our white polo shirt, which is one of our icons. You have 80-year-old men wearing it, 40-year-old women wearing it, 16-year-old kids wearing it. Same product, but we style it differently.
And I wonder whether, I mean, is your secret sauce also that you're the right lifestyle brand for the right moment? Because it's not, people don't go to haute couture events anymore, or less. They have a more relaxed approach even when they come to the office.
Yeah, hopefully more than just this moment, Francine, because we want to be here for another 50 years. But I do think what Ralph and the teams have been able to create over time is indeed that lifestyle proposition that is not dependent. We're not handbag experts, or we're not outerwear experts, or we're not sneaker experts. We offer a lifestyle, and we offer this range of product. And indeed, as we've seen people still working from home partly, coming back to the office, going back to social events, we have this ability to serve you with a more athleisure-driven type of proposition.
So are we going to the office in hoodies now? Has work from home changed us? I'm in a tuxedo, so maybe not if you're on TV.
Maybe it depends which industry you're in. I think at Ralph Lauren, I haven't seen many people in hoodies, but Ralph does come in once in a while in a double RL hoodie or a polo hoodie, but he makes it look beautiful, as you can imagine.
Up next, Patrice Louvet on raising prices, ambitions in Asia, and why sustainability is key.
You can't expect to be timeless if we're run out of resources. So for me, sustainability is not a side activity. It's not a reaction to external pressure. It's core to who we are, what we stand for. And to a very strong extent, it's about future-proofing our business.
Top names in climate finance are on Bloomberg.
I can't tell whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about climate finance.
A lot of great stuff is happening, but is it enough? No, it's not enough.
I'm biased. I'm a huge investor in both fission and fusion, and hoping that it comes in time.
Transition is not going to be an event. It's a process.
But at the end of the day, it's the right thing for the planet, it's the right thing for the industry, and there is business opportunity.
Always on the heartbeat of the tech
spread across global markets.
The real-time data aspect is going to be important.
We're going to bring you expert analysis on that. Sure.
Don't miss Bloomberg's interview with the...
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg?
That is a great question.
It's a great question.
Great question. Great question. Best question I get all night.
Bloomberg, top experts, great questions.
Ralph Lauren has raised the average price of its products by around 80% since 2018, as it aims to elevate its brand and become a lifestyle luxury company, something the chief executive is passionate about. I continue the conversation with Patrice Louvet. When you look at pricing, you've also been able to really elevate the brand by increasing prices. Is there a limit to how much you can increase prices by before it hurts demand?
Our average unit retail indeed is up about close to 80% now since we started on this journey. Short answer is I don't think there's a limit, as long as we do a good job on elevating the product, elevating the storytelling, elevating the environment, making sure that the consumer sees the value, and they have so far. Our value perception actually are the highest they've been since we've been tracking it. But the onus is on us to make sure that we are able to provide this consistent elevation. as the consumer sees it, then that'll support the continued growth of average unit retail.
Talk to me about China.
Yes.
So China has a huge potential, but it's actually still quite a small market for you.
It is still small for us. Yeah, huge short, mid, and long-term potential for us. So it's about 6% of the company today. That's double what it was 3-4 years ago, but still in absolute quite small when you look at the penetration of the Chinese business for some of the best luxury players in the industry that are 20, 30, 40%. So I'm excited about the opportunities and the runway. What's really energizing for us in China is how the brand is connecting with that younger consumer and that more elevated consumer. I mean, we sell, oddly enough, but I think it's the result of all the elevation work the teams have done, our most elevated products we sell best in China. We have the best gender balance, as I believe you know, most of our business historically has been more men. In China, it's a good balance, men, women. And it's a relatively young consumer, late 20s, early 30s. So it's actually a good example for us for the rest of the world. We're being very deliberate in our approach in China. So we could grow faster, but we want to do it in a quality way. So we're building the brand. So that serves us well 5 years from now. 10 years from now, but I'm very excited about just more generally Asia and China.
So are you worried that you dilute the brand if you become too big in China too quickly?
Yes, I think the notion of desirability is critical for this industry, and there is some element of exclusivity that's important to support it. And I think that's why we pulled back in the US, where we felt like we had over-distributed. And become, to some extent, ubiquity can be a challenge in the luxury space. Not to some extent, it is a challenge in the luxury space, and you want to stay unique and special. That's what we're building in markets like China, and even as we look ahead to markets like India, which are promising for the future, being very deliberate on planting the right foundation so we can build from there with the right image perception.
So the world is changing. We talk about AI all the time. We talk, of course, about sustainability and the need for fashion companies to do more.
Yes.
How much time do you spend thinking about sustainability?
A lot. And I'll tell you why. I go back to our conversation on purpose earlier, right? Inspire the dream of better life through timelessness and authentic style. Timelessness and sustainability go together, right? You can't expect to be timeless if we're run out of resources. So for me, sustainability is not a side activity. It's not a reaction to external pressure. It's core to who we are, what we stand for. And to a very strong extent, it's about future-proofing our business, right? You need to focus on sustainability to recruit. More and more, that younger consumer we're talking about, they want to work for companies that care about this planet, that do more than just kind of generate revenue and profit. You need sustainability to attract consumers. More and more, including that younger consumer, they care deeply about what are you doing differently? How are you making a difference? Investors, particularly in Europe, more and more place value on what you're doing in sustainability. Many of our partners have expectations on sustainability.
What does that look like for a luxury lifestyle company?
So for us, it's multidimensional. Right now, we're putting a lot of emphasis on circularity. And I actually think if we're able to shift the business model in fashion from linear to circular, that's probably one of the biggest changes we can make that has the greatest impact. Now, obviously, that's a total ecosystem you have to impact, but it's, to give you examples, it's innovating how we design. So we've just launched the first cradle-to-cradle certified cashmere sweater. It's innovating in materials. It's innovating with the processors. There's a company called Reverso in Italy, for example, that helps us with recycling cashmere. And then it's leveraging industry scale, because I think in sustainability, we can't go it alone.
So, but do you sell differently to the Chinese than you do to the American consumers in terms of lifestyle, or is it still the similar lifestyle?
I think the fundamentals of our lifestyles and the different kind of movies that we showcase, different stories that we tell are pretty consistent. If anything, just in the way that consumers kind of dress and engage with fashion brands. On average, this is a generalization, but on average, the Chinese consumer, just like the Japanese or Korean consumer, tends to be more elevated and sophisticated in the types of styles that they put together. So that informs parts of our buy and our product, but fundamentally...
So what, more innovative, it's not necessarily more edgy, it's more luxurious?
No, it's more luxurious, yeah. It's actually more elevated and more luxurious.
I mean, what's amazing is also there seems to be a trend, and you may be one of the first ones, to get chief executives from parts of the industry that weren't luxury and fashion, that were actually consumer products. Is there a parallel? Do consumer products chief executives do better than luxury?
Oh, that's a big statement. I'm not going to answer that question directly. You know, this trend started in beauty, actually. If you kind of rewind the tapes, beauty is where you started to see CPG consumer professionals kind of come in first. And now we're seeing that in the fashion world. I think at the end of the day, success in this industry is getting the balance right between magic and logic. And so obviously the fashion industry, the creative leaders have the magic. There's an opportunity to bring a higher level of logic without diluting the magic. And I think what people from the consumer goods industry bring are greater focus on the consumer, understanding the consumer. Now, I think where you get success is designer vision, customer needs come together, and then that's where things get exposed. So greater understanding of the consumer, more data, more experience, leveraging data in decision making. Again, there's an element of intuition that needs to be protected, but that can be supplemented by data.
What's the ideal algorithm to where to put a store?
It's confidential, I can't tell you.
You'd have to kill me.
But I would have to, no, I wouldn't do that. But we do look at a number of metrics, whether that's obviously consumer profile, whether that's competitive environment, whether that's the type of products that are being sold in the area. And then the last thing I would point to is operational discipline. I mean, these are complex businesses, right? We develop a lot of SKUs every year, complex supply chains. And I think what you learn in the consumer goods industry is how to run pretty rigorous and disciplined supply chains and just general operations. And a lot of these luxury companies now are $5, 10, 15, $20 billion, right? The level of complexity requires great expertise there.
So how do you choose celebrities and influencers? Again, when you look at the, you know, you said we used to rely on magazines. Everything's changed now. So are consumers more influenced by, you know, by influencers and celebrities than they used to?
I think influencers has always been part of the business, whether it's the fashion industry or other spaces.
But it was more controlled. Is that the difference compared to 10 years ago?
I think it was more, you're right, it was less spokespeople, and now you have a much broader palette. For us, what's critical is authenticity. So the concept of, I'm going to write you a big check, for instance, today, and you're going to talk about us, and then tomorrow you're going to show up on a competitive brand because you got another big check. We're not interested in that. We want people who have an authentic relationship.
Up next, Patrice Louvet on risk-taking, gambling with the metaverse, and the next 50 years.
The only failure is a failure of learning. So even if we've tried and it bombed, as long as we capture the learnings and we apply them elsewhere, it was a success.
Regional sports networks. There's a lot of, it's a business that seems to be collapsing. Leagues have sort of toyed around with, should we do something ourselves? Some teams are doing like local TV and streaming. How do you see that shaking out?
So I don't think I'm right on this, but my instincts keep telling me this is what's going to happen. Because if you remember the WWE, they launched their own network that had their own content and had their own pay-per-views. And it was kind of a smart, bold, ahead of its time move. And then they pivoted at the perfect time and they sold their content to, what was it, Peacock?
Yeah.
And that was really smart too, because they were able to leverage that number as high as possible. So they always zagged where the money was and when the opportunity was. I think the opportunity for the NBA with the local teams would be to own all that themselves.
From the world of politics to the world of business, every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, hosts Joe Matthew and Keely Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live from Bloomberg's Washington headquarters. Get the latest from and about politics' biggest power players at the end of every trading day. Balance of Power, live around the world every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
More than half of Ralph Lauren's customers are women, yet they represent less than a third of sales. It's an area of the business the chief executive sees as an opportunity, as he bets on growth in women's merchandise. I continue the conversation with Patrice Louvet.
What's next for Ralph Lauren? Are you going to focus on sleepwear? Are there other parts that you think you can grow a lot more?
Yeah, what's amazing with this brand and what Ralph has created is we can actually enter a lot of spaces with automatic credibility. Look, we are one of the hottest restaurants in New York with the Polo Bar. We are looking for an opportunity for us to open one here in London. But that's a part of our ecosystem. Is not a core priority for us. Next spaces for us are winning with women. As I mentioned earlier, our business historically has been driven by men. Today, 56% of our customers are actually women on our website and our stores. They represent less than 30% of our business. So that's a massive opportunity for us. And I think as we get to her, understand her better, develop the right products for her, present the products in a way that resonates with her, which may not be the same way as for men, that's a big opportunity for us. Handbags is an area, as part of kind of completing the style for women, is an area. And then we're looking into home. And I actually think if you reflect on Ralph's approach to this space, again, he creates these environments, creates this world. You can really picture how that translates into home. So that's an area of growth for us. Longer term, but I'm actually pretty excited about the perspectives there.
The metaverse.
Yes.
Are you excited about the metaverse? I was, and then I think now we're talking about AI, so everyone's forgotten about the metaverse.
You're right. The media headlines have moved on, but the consumer has not, which is actually very interesting.
So are you investing in the metaverse?
We are investing in the metaverse. It follows the principle I talked about earlier, which is we want to be where our consumer is. That's where the younger population is. That's where they want to engage with brands like us. We want to play a leadership role there, and I'm excited about what we were doing. We've got a partnership with Fortnite, so important space for us.
Partnership with Fortnite. I mean, you don't do you dress the?
You can buy your skin. So if you play on Fortnite, you can actually dress your player in the Ralph Lauren skin. And we've actually done, there's some really cool boots that we developed that you can dress your player with, but we've actually done a physical version of them as well.
Was that quite a gamble? I mean, going into, it's brave, so it paid off. It could have backfired.
True, but here's where I go back to the roots of this company. Ralph started with a tie. We could be here 56 years later being the market leader globally of ties. Part of the DNA of this company is trying things, innovating, expanding, experimenting. So we're just staying true to that. And I always talk about the fact that the only failure is a failure of learning. So even if we've tried and it bombed, as long as we capture the learnings and reapply them elsewhere, it was a success.
Patrice, what are you like as a leader? A risk taker?
I think the people, if you ask them throughout my career how they would describe me, they would say servant leader. I really believe in the fact that my job is to set the team up for success and create the conditions for people to leverage their full potential. If I do that well, I'll be fine. I think people would say listener, right? And there's a great quote from a Greek philosopher. It's like, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And there's a reason for that. People would say I'm a learner and constant learning, and actually Ralph is an incredible inspiration because, based on where he is at this stage in life, he's constantly learning, and I use that as inspiration. I am a measured risk taker, I would say. I am not a swing for the fence risk taker, but I believe in innovating, experimenting, and trying new things, and I think you feel that energy inside the company today. I love that spirit of just trying things and, again, learning.
What's a good day in the Louvet world? So how do you measure success?
A good day for me, listen, where I get the greatest energy and excitement is time in the stores with our team.
So what do you do? Do you change things around, or do you just
No, I try to hold myself from doing that. It's very tempting, but I try to avoid doing that. No, I just listen to the stories that our teams tell me, both in terms of how they're engaging with customers, what we could do better in terms of the brand and product, and then also how they're building culture within their stores.
And you're committed to the UK?
Very committed to the UK, second biggest market for the company, historical market for us, and great source of inspiration for Ralph. So this market's very important to us.
Okay, worst day in the office. Did you have
a bad day? I haven't had a lot. Obviously, when the numbers aren't coming through the way you'd like them to come in, that never feels very good, right? But that's welcome to life in the business world. When we're not able to get the balance right between the magic and the logic, and the groups are not communicating well, and that obviously can be frustrating. The fashion industry, one of the lovely things about it is it's very emotional. One of the challenging things about it is it's very emotional. And so it's managing people's emotions.
Were you surprised that even in this cost of living crisis, actually luxury, it just, does so well?
Listen, I think people need to dream, right? When the environment is more challenging and people still need to dream. They need someone who's going to give them hope and bring optimism, and I think that's what the best luxury companies do well.
Where will you be in 5 years?
I mean, we're on an exciting journey right now as a firm, both in terms of expansion geographically. We'll be stronger in Asia. We'll have established a good presence in India. We'll be better distributed across Europe. We'll be more present in the west of the U.S. because that's actually a big white space for us. I think you'll see our women's business to be more successful and larger than what it is today. And then what I hope is that I'm still at the helm working closely with Ralph to bring dreams to life for all of our consumers around the world.
Patrice, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Francie.
Let's suppose you're on a plane and somebody realizes who you are. They say, I have $100,000. I don't know what to do with it. Where should I invest it? Where should they put their money?
So today, it's a easier decision than it was maybe 2 years ago because Treasury bills are 5%. So I would say, regardless of how much risk you want to take, you have to put a portion there. Then you would have to ask, really, an individual is the same, I think, as any institution. What is your time frame? Do you need to get access to this $100,000 in the next few weeks, the next few months, the next few years, not until you retire? And that will determine your investment decision.
So what do you think is the most common mistake investors make when they have 100,000, $1 million, or whatever they might have? What is the most common mistake you have observed that investors make?
I would say hubris and thinking you know more than you do, because every decision that you make has many, many layers. So as you're creating a portfolio, look at the risk as well, not just excited about the return.
And what's the best investment advice anybody's ever given to you?
Continue to learn about innovation in whatever you do, because that is where it's not exciting, that's where returns will go.
In a very, very short period of time. Yeah. Every single child, every single student, everywhere on this planet will actually have access to a tutor, someone who can help educate them one-to-one.
In their pockets.
Right, and we know that one-to-one education is, in fact, the one that has the best value and the best outcome. So the idea that you can have custom to who you are, to your language, male, female, young, old, relatable, funny, serious, Shakespeare, whoever you want, can be your tutor, your teacher that you can learn from, just seems to me like such a amazing transformation across the globe.
This is Bloomberg News Now.
News when you want it at the touch of a button.
Another volatile day on Wall Street. We're seeing big moves.
All eyes on Capitol Hill as Democrats and Republicans prepare.
Today's job numbers casting doubt on the Fed's next move. Inflation remains front and center. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. Get it 24/7 on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Bloomberg News Now. Context changes everything.
Or other authorities.
Could face bigger challenges next.
Fed was going to keep rate World Cup. This is a 3
as the economic picture
covering the intersections of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and beyond.
Welcome to the best of the Bloomberg Transition Finance Action Forum. I'm Francine Lacroix. This forum brought together global leaders from the private and public sectors to focus on what's been achieved in transition finance and to propel continuing action to support a global net zero economic transformation. Let's begin with the European perspective and my conversation with Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission.
COP28 is a decisive moment, and my expectations and my hope
is that we're going to be successful in three fields. First, ambition. Second, targets. And the third is finance. What ambition is concerned, we need more ambition. We know that at the moment being, we are off track, but we can still make it to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limited to that point. And therefore, we need to increase our ambition. The ambition of the nationally determined contributions of the different countries at the COP28, but also, for example, to peak greenhouse gas emissions in 25. Or for example, to be very clear on getting rid of unabated fossil fuels. These are topics that are very important. The second is targets. It was Mike Bloomberg said it, only what gets measured gets done. And we do not have at the moment being a global target how we want to deploy renewable energy till 2030. And we need such a global target because really we have to be on the right trajectory. Therefore, I hope we're going to have a global target defined that we triple the deployment of renewable energy till 2030, and that we double energy efficiency. Doubling energy efficiency means energy we do not use. And the third topic is climate finance. So ambition, targets, finance.
And President, do you see that resolve from world leaders to actually come together and get more done in those three fields?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's still a time in the run-up to the COP28 where we have to negotiate intensively. But a typical topic is, for example, climate finance. As you know, there is the promise out there since years now that the highly industrialized countries deliver 100 billion dollars, sorry, 100 billion dollars every year to developing countries and emerging economies. I'm deeply convinced that this year we're going to make it and we're going to deliver. The European Union is contributing its fair share with $27 billion. So I hope that the others step up too. And this is a matter of trust. If we deliver, the developing countries trust the whole process, and then we can move forward with the ambition, for example.
And the scale of this is immense, right? How much of this money is actually needed for emerging economies? What's the one thing that could hold them back?
Well, on one hand, you need for the emerging economies public investment from us, but you also need to attract private capital. It won't work without private capital. And there we have a new initiative because we've seen one of the most effective tools to nudge private capital into green projects, sustainable projects, are green bonds. The European Union has the largest green bond market. The green bond market otherwise is dominated by the United States and China, but there are no developing countries or low and middle income countries that have sufficient green bond markets. So we've decided we're going to share our expertise with the low and middle income countries so that they can build up their green bond markets. And we're going to be an anchor investor. That's very important, providing round about $1 billion to leverage up to 15 to 20 billion, because we have to de-risk for the private capital the investment that they are doing. So the green bond market's one of the major projects we're launching right now, and I put a lot of hope in it that it will attract the necessary capital, private capital, to the low and middle income countries.
Is there anything else that actually Europe can offer in terms of attracting this private capital to emerging economies?
Yes, there's a second big topic that we have. We call it Global Gateway.
Yeah.
Global Gateway is our investment program for critical infrastructure abroad. And of course, a big chunk goes into green projects, sustainable projects. And here, together with the private capital that we're leveraging, it's around 300 billion euros that are ready to be invested. And here it's very fascinating because, I mean, if we want to master the clean transition to renewable energies, we need the Global South. The Global South has all the resources in abundance, the wind and the sun, but it doesn't have the infrastructure. So it's a perfect match. If Global Gateway is there, Our task is with Global Gateway to de-risk private capital here, to create, for example, a conducive judicial environment or regulatory environment for projects that are going forward. I give you examples. We have now green hydrogen projects with Kenya and with Namibia started, but also with India, with Chile, for example. Or we have projects on forest management with Brazil, with Zambia, with Indonesia. We have a lot of projects for solar and wind. So all critical infrastructure, it's a win-win situation. We need this additional renewable energy. For example, I was just talking about the targets till 2030, a tripling of deployment of renewable energy. And here for the private capital that really wants to go into these projects, we are de-risking, and we're the ones also who are showing this is true and trusted as a project.
President, the Global South is worried that actually the cost of capital is so much higher for them. Do you share the same concerns?
The cost of capital is higher. If, for example, if we look at wind onshore, it's 3.3% in the European Union. It's around 7.2% in Africa. If you look at solar, it's around 4% in the European Union, 8% in Africa. So this is where Global Gateway is absolutely the right instrument to go in there, de-risk, be the anchor investor, make sure that the project functions, and attract private capital to these projects.
President, going back to some of the green bond markets that some of these economies can develop themselves, what's the hardest thing about that, apart from attracting capital? Is there any advice that you would give?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, you start from scratch. It's lots of technicalities. It's very technical. So to share this expertise, we built up our green bond market, so to share everything which is necessary for it. Of course, to invest also at the beginning that this green bond market can be build up, and then get supply and demand at the same time started. This is why we are so important as anchor investor.
Where do you see it first? So how much and how quickly can that scale up, you think?
Depends on the speed that we are developing, but we've seen in our own green bond market, it was a steep rise immediately of the demand is out there. There's a lot of capital out there that is looking for the good projects. So we've seen it with the own green bond market. It really went like this, oversubscribed enormously. Therefore, the idea was born to do the same for the low and middle income countries. And as I said, the resources they have them in abundance. They need the infrastructure, and therefore there's a lot of good capital out there that is looking for the reliable projects. Therefore, it's a perfect match.
Coming up, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. This is Bloomberg.
What happened was you were offered a money-losing women's basketball team, and you said, I want to be in the other sports as well. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you got to be smart about this.
Welcome back to the Bloomberg Transition Finance Action Forum. I'm Francine Lacqua. Since becoming Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen has warned of the dangers that climate change could have on the global economy. Speaking at the forum, she was no less forceful. Take a look.
The physical impacts of climate change are impossible to ignore. We've seen record-breaking heat waves that have led to a tragic spike in heat-related deaths and hospitalizations, unprecedented storms and wildfires are destroying homes and undermining livelihoods. Vulnerable populations globally are disproportionately affected because of where they live and the industries in which they work, and low-income Americans are no exception. Such events impose significant economic costs. Global economic losses from natural disasters amounted to almost $200 billion during the first half of this year. Households face increasing challenges, and firms have assets and business models that may be at risk in a world with substantial climate change. It's no surprise then that the climate crisis is propelling a massive economic shift. There's increasing demand for technologies, products, and services that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support a clean energy future. In the United States, government support is playing a role in accelerating this transition. President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law provides funding for wide-ranging investments, including $7.5 billion in electric vehicle charging, $10 billion in clean transportation, and over $20 billion to upgrade the power grid. The Inflation Reduction Act, the most ambitious climate law in U.S. history, expands demand and supply-side incentives for clean energy investment and production. At the Treasury Department, our economists, lawyers, and other experts are working tirelessly to support implementation, including through issuing rules on wide-ranging tax incentives. And private sector companies are responding, and quickly. Over the past 2.5 years, they've committed $240 billion in new clean energy manufacturing investments. The Treasury Department has surveyed how financial institutions are setting and meeting net zero commitments. We've engaged in discussions with market participants, research organizations, and civil society organizations. We've tracked the substantial body of research, guidelines, and voluntary standards on net zero financing, investment, and advisory services. And through this work, we've identified the need for greater clarity on best practices around these commitments. So we are proud to launch the Net Zero Principles in response. Our goal is to affirm the importance of credible net zero commitments and to encourage financial institutions that make them to take consistent approaches to implementation. Our work will also help institutions that have not yet made commitments see what doing so might entail. The principles draw on the emerging best practices that we're seeing in the financial sector. They establish that financial institutions' net zero commitments should be in line with limiting the increase in the global average temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. They affirm that financial institutions that have made these commitments should develop transition plans with clear practices, targets, and metrics, and that they should support their clients and portfolio companies in adopting their own transition plans. The principles also outline specific activities that are particularly important to effective net zero commitments. These include providing transition finance, such as for clients pursuing decarbonization in high-emitting sectors, and focusing on climate solutions, such as making investments in cutting-edge clean energy technologies.
We have in London now the world's biggest clean air zone, covering an area more than 600 square miles, 9 million Londoners that are breathing clean air. But if you look at the history of these policies, there's always been initial pushback. The initial congestion charge in London, 2003, opposition. No one would dream of reversing that congestion charge in 2008. We brought in a low emission zone for big vehicles. All of London was covered. A lot of objection from those who were drivers of lorries. Would dream of reversing that. When I brought in the first ever ultra-low emission zone in central London, lots of concern. But we saw in a couple of years a reduction of almost 50% of toxic air, a third fewer children being admitted to hospital because of air pollution illnesses. We expanded it, some opposition there, but we saw a 20% reduction in air pollution. There has been some genuine concerns that Londoners have had, which we've sought to address. 3 weeks in now, since the US was expanded, and people have realized actually their vehicle probably is compliant. They're not paying a penny more. They've seen the benefits of cleaner air.
We're also hearing reports that the government is trying to possibly water down some of the previous commitments made to net zero. Is climate change now toxic?
Well, what's happening is some people are trying to weaponize climate change, weaponize air pollution. And here's the perversity of what Prime Minister Sunak is doing. We've seen in the UK in September, in London in September, for the first time ever, 4 consecutive days of temperatures north of 30 degrees Celsius. We saw last year in London temperatures north of 40 degrees Celsius, wildfires in London. We've seen across Europe and the global north in America, wildfires, droughts, heat waves. The response of government should be actually to turn this awful crisis into an opportunity, creating green jobs, a Green New Deal, thinking about how we can both save the planet, address climate change, but also give people security and have that just transition. And this is basically, lazy politics from a weak prime minister throwing red meat to his backbenchers because he's so weak and ineffectual.
Mayor, what are you most excited about in the climate space? So is it green bond issuance? Can London financial as a center actually become a hub for green finance and green issuance?
We started our conversation by you talking about the ultra emission zone, the world's biggest clean air zone. There are so many exciting things happening in London. We have the largest amount of electric buses in the Western world, the largest amount of rapid charging points in Western Europe, I beg your pardon. Record numbers of trees being planted, rewilding, half our taxis are electric. What I'm saying to investors around the globe is London is the green capital of the world. This crisis of the climate emergency can be an opportunity. We have a green bond in London, more than £500 million. Come to London, invest, and also at the same time, make sure that the London Stock Exchange is known as the Green Stock Exchange.
Coming up, more from the Bloomberg Transition Finance Action Forum. This is Bloomberg.
I think this will probably go down in history as one of, if not the largest financial crimes ever.
I cannot imagine a scenario where $8 billion just disappears.
Bankman-Fried has pled not guilty to multiple fraud charges.
Sam was just too important in the crypto community.
When someone says, I'm going to give $1 billion in the next 2 years, that catches everybody's attention.
As time went on, their ideas got weirder and weirder.
I don't think he even had almost a conception at some points that it was wrong or right. I think he just had the mentality that he has to win.
This committee will not stop until we uncover the full truth behind the collapse of FTX.
Sue, Mark.
Are you in? I'm in.
I'm in.
We're in.
Will this be the last of its kind? No. This is the nature of capitalism. Get over it.
Bloomberg covers the world with unmatched reach and resources. From more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg, context changes everything.
This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to the Plaza Hotel and the Bloomberg Transition Finance Action Forum. I'm Francine Lacqua. Transition to a net zero future will require private capital as well. Here's the former BOE governor, Mark Carney, with leaders from HSBC, MSCI, and Prudential, talking about the work private finance is doing to support the net zero economic transition.
The $100 trillion economy relies on measurements. If we say, what's the unemployment rate in this country, that country, what's the economic growth, how much trade between this and all of that, you need data and you need measurements and you need standards. So the climate transition is going to be an overlay on all of that. Yeah. So what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. We know that. So what we're focusing on those two components. The first component is how do we go around measuring carbon emissions, future carbon emissions, valuation of assets, financial assets, risk of those assets, et cetera. So a lot of our work is in doing all of that. Now, for that, you need data and you need models. So we are, we're extremely focused on that. And at the moment, to give you a report of where we are, we have climate emission estimates on about 4 million financial instruments, which compose of about 1.1 million assets, meaning manufacturing plants, office buildings, mines, et cetera, storage facilities, et cetera. And when you distill it down to, it's about 68,000 companies and issuers, and about 70,000 funds, ETF funds, mutual funds, and private equity funds, private debt funds, et cetera. So we are focusing on the collection of the data, but that's a small part. You gotta then model the data to be able to understand what are the current emissions and the future emissions. So for example, if you take all the listed companies in the world today, they emit somewhere about 12.5 billion metric tons. 20 years from now, our estimate is going to be 17.5 billion. We're not going in the right direction, 17.5 billion. So that's the first part. So our ambition is to be able to flood the world with so much data and measurements that they don't have to worry about the data and the measurements. That what they will worry about are the action plans associated with dealing with the transition.
So Noel, how are we attacking this problem? Where are we? What are the real priorities to get capital to the emerging developing world for climate?
Well, listen, certainly I can talk for Asia very deeply, but most importantly, I say I'm very encouraged when I talk to clients and customers in Asia. Take India, for example, some of the largest corporates in India, the amount of money they are investing in building new infrastructure, using their own private sector capacity, requiring not a huge amount from the governments to make that investment become a reality, very often just planning consent. I'm encouraged that there's a huge amount of action already taking place on changing to green energy, on electrification. So there's a lot happening. However, there are some projects that require private and public sector to work together. The early retirement of coal cannot be achieved by the private sector alone. It requires public policy. It requires public financial support in certain countries. So those are challenging parts of the transition to a green energy. And I think we have to find a way to scale that fast. And I worry at the moment that too many of those conversations are happening project by project. There isn't an architecture.
So Noel is completely right that in the absence of a carbon price, it's very hard for us to spontaneously, as a private sector, create the levels of finance that we're talking about. After all, we're financing quite often, global public goods and externality. Yeah. So we need to have the partnership with multilateral development banks as mobilizers in chief of private finance. But currently, they only mobilize about, say, 1.2 times, roughly, or even less, but in some cases, of the amount of money that they put into emerging markets, and we need to have multiples of that. And so Noel is completely right. The way to do that is to have models and financing structures that are speedy, with no disrespect to my dear friends at the various multilateral banks. I mean, you cannot be there for 3 years structuring something. It is just, we don't have the patience for it in the private sector. So we need to have something that is speedy, at scale, replicable, not bespoke, standardizable, creates liquidity in the market. And so what we're working on, what we've been thinking through, and we're going to have our first meeting this week, is what are the sorts of things that you just put out there. They're simplified and at scale and they're speedy. So it could be around guarantees. We had a discussion that you chaired this afternoon, Mark, on foreign exchange, which is a big deterrent for foreign investors. We could talk about securitizations, and we could talk about creating liquidity. So those are the sorts of things we're talking about.
And that's all from the Bloomberg Transition Finance Action Forum. You can find complete interviews and panels at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is Bloomberg.
One of my greatest advantages, I own my company 100%. No board of directors. I make a decision, we move. And I had a guy say to me, runs a big media company. This guy ran a major division, Warner Discovery. Okay. It was just Warner Media at that time. He says, you know what, when we sit in our meetings, we don't talk about Disney. We don't talk about Paramount. We don't talk about Sony. He goes, you know who we talk about? I go, who? You. I said, really? He goes, yeah, you. I go, why? He goes, we are giant battleships, and you're like a little speedboat. And if there's gold on the beach, you run rings around us, get to the beach, take the gold, and by the time we turn our battleship around, you've already taken the gold. I go, that's right. I'm always gonna be that entrepreneur. I started my company from my dining room table 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And I started by calling every television station, asking them to carry my once-a-week show. On average, they all said no 50 times, and I worked through about 50,000 no's to get 150 yeses. That guy that was at that dining room table trying to pay his phone bill is that same guy today, 30 years later. That fire is still in my belly. I still run scared, and I'm still running after that vision of building the world's biggest media company.
You formed a partnership with Penny Pritzker at some point to do parking, is that right?
Yeah, so when I was working at JLL, that we went through this real estate recession in the early 90s, and the senior people at the firm said, let's do a retrospective on all these different asset classes to see what happened, how we overpaid, why we ran into so much trouble, what really happened in the marketplace. And when I did that, I recognized, well, there were a lot of reasons why I liked the parking assets better than I did office and retail and industrial. And so I started really noodling on the differences between those asset classes and came up with a rationale to start a business in the parking space. Then I crossed paths with Penny Pritzker, who later became our Secretary of Commerce. And she liked the idea, and she and I went off on this adventure together and built a real estate operating company in the parking space.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern every weekday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern, only on Bloomberg. Your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield at its new time, Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
You can see the massive gains for the OG crypto coin.
The breakout we have all perhaps long awaited finally realized. We'll see if it sticks.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto, the people.
There's no question this industry is composed of some bad actors and some good actors.
The transactions.
Volumes have surpassed $24 billion per day.
And the technology.
Stop talking about the technology, start demonstrating the utility.
Bloomberg Crypto.
Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Screen Time. I'm Caroline Hyde.
And I'm Ed Ludlow. We're living through one of the most disruptive transformations in entertainment and pop culture, with storied Hollywood studios going head-to-head with technology giants like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple, and actors and writers striking for a bigger piece of the streaming pie and to protect against artificial intelligence.
Bloomberg Screen Time brought together media moguls, celebrities, and entrepreneurs who are influencing the next phase of pop culture. Now, while streaming and social media apps like, well, TikTok, they've upended how Hollywood does business, some things, they remain the same. So let's start with Ari Emanuel, Endeavor and TKO CEO. He spoke with Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw on his deal to merge UFC and WWE and the future of sports.
Now, on the sports rights front, a lot of this is predicated on that market continuing to increase.
Yeah.
That has been ballooning for a long, long time.
Right.
Given what you're seeing with the kind of continued collapse of TV, the way that some...
Okay, I'm not going to interrupt you, okay?
Yeah,
the NFL
well, you know where I'm
made a
going.
10-year deal with linear television. 10 years, okay? The linear business is not going anywhere. They've also made deals on digital. We did the same thing, ESPN, ESPN Plus on the UFC side. WWE did, Peacock, Showtime, USA Network, and Fox, which is whatever. So the linear business is not going anywhere. The sports business is moving is going to figure itself out between digital and linear. It's an unbelievably healthy market. They all have to be in it. They all want to be, every single one of the players want to be in it because of the audience. We have two assets in the sports business that are year-long, don't have a season. I don't believe prices are going down. You're going to figure out the bifurcation of the rights and give things up, not give things up.
How long do you think it is before Netflix actually jumps into sports?
You know, they're in sports right now, but they just do the shoulder programming.
Yeah.
I think their point of view, and you'll ask Ted tomorrow, is we build up we don't want to be in the bidding of rights and then not have any long tail. So I'm not sure. They did bid on Formula One, but ESPN got it. So I think that was a smaller package, meaning smaller economics. So we'll see.
So generally speaking, box office is down globally around 20% to 2019, so pre-pandemic levels. But this summer, it was 5% down, right? So it would suggest that even though there were winners and losers of this summer, and obviously we had the two big juggernauts with Barbie and Oppenheimer, you know, movie-going begets movie-going, right? So when there's a season filled with, you know, good movies that people want to see, you know, I was made to feel pretty optimistic about what we saw in the summer.
What you mentioned Oppenheimer. We can talk about Barbie, although that's not one of your movies. Your two big movies of the year were Mario and Oppenheimer. Which of those was a bigger surprise to you?
I think probably Oppenheimer. You know, I mean, an R-rated film with that subject matter, and you know, at the running time, and I wasn't surprised that it was successful, right? I mean, it's Christopher Nolan. We know that he is a singular filmmaker who audiences globally really want to go see. But I was really surprised at the sort of the breadth of the audience, the demographic. It skewed from young kids, not young kids, but teenagers, all the way up to, you know, an older audience. So it was pretty surprising.
Do you feel like the success of Oppenheimer says anything about the business, or is it the case that Chris Nolan and Quentin Tarantino seem like two filmmakers where if they make a movie, they're like a brand, right? Even if they're original, people will show up to see them.
I think in the case of Christopher Nolan, he makes films for the big screen, and really for the big screen only. Of course, you can watch a Christopher Nolan movie at home, and eventually you'll be able to do that. But you know, I mean, everything he does, from shooting on IMAX to to 70 millimeter, to the way that he really his films encourage audiences to experience his films on IMAX screens and in the large format. I think it all speaks to, again, I use that word, a sort of singular cinematic experience. You know what you're going to get, not subject matter wise, but you know you're going to get a very fulfilling experience at the movie theater, and sort of, quite frankly, value for your money.
If you were Bob Iger, what would you do with ESPN?
I would sell it.
To who?
I would sell it to Apple, and Apple could take their entire budget for 2 episodes of the morning show and pay for ESPN, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They could be like, you know what, maybe we don't need to launch a rocket in outer space in episode 1. We'll just buy ESPN instead. And that'll be it.
Related question, regional sports networks. There's a lot of, it's a business that seems to be collapsing. Leagues have sort of toyed around with, should we do something ourselves? Some teams are doing like local TV and streaming. How do you see that shaking out?
So I don't think I'm right on this, but my instincts keep telling me this is what's going to happen. Because if you remember the WWE, they launched their own network that had their own content and had their own pay-per-views. And it was kind of a smart, bold, ahead of its time move. And then they pivoted at the perfect time and they sold their content to, what was it, Peacock?
Yeah.
And that was really smart too, because they were able to leverage that number as high as possible. So they always zagged where the money was and when the opportunity was. I think the opportunity for the NBA with the local teams would be to own all that themselves and only pass themselves and do it in a way that they could just basically own all of it. And I don't know if they'll do that or they'll have the to do it, but they, with the media rights deal that they're gonna get from the national games, they're gonna make so much money and the players are gonna be paid so much money. Like, we're gonna have guys making 75, 80 million a year. So if there was ever a time for them to kind of bet on themselves, that's the league to do it.
There's all this mystery around what is success in streaming. It's engagement. It is how much time do people spend on the service, because that tells you how much they'll pay and how long they'll stick around.
What are the metrics for Netflix that are most important when evaluating a show or a movie?
Yeah, you guys take us to task a lot on this transparency issue. I would say, look, definitely relative to peers, we're incredibly transparent. And we're completely transparent with our producers, so they know exactly the viewing data. And then we're going through things like the top 10 and through things like we publish the viewing hours of the top shows. And we're definitely heading towards a much more transparent time in the business. The streaming itself is not that exotic anymore. And every other segment of the business does have Nielsen ratings or box office reports or the New York Times bestseller list, all those things. So we're heading towards that for sure. To a time we'll be fully transparent on viewing data.
Does that mean it's, sorry, go ahead.
No, so that will demystify this for a lot of people, which is basically what I can care about the most is relative to what it costs to put on the air, are people watching? And when they push play, do they stay? So if they push play and then drop out in the second or third season, or third
which is completion rate for...
Yeah. So those things all matter, but they all add up to the same thing, which is engagement. So I think all the data is really there. You might have to triangulate it a little bit to get to it, but all the data is really there.
What was the toughest cancellation decision you've had recently?
They're all tough. The reason why, because I think that people have got a real fandom. They really love these. Some people really love all these shows, even if the rest of the world doesn't agree with them. So for them, that's why you see sometimes these very obscure shows and you hear very loud campaigns about stop the cancellations, because they have such an intense relationship with it. That's why I love this business so much. I relate to it. Sometimes my personal taste is really far outside of the norm, and what I've been decent at over the years, and pick people who are good at doing this. But when I look at it, I think it's if I was programming to my taste, we'd be very small. So we're trying to program to the world's taste. But they're all hard. They really are all difficult decisions to make because people love these shows so much, and there's some things are just a puzzle. You scratch your head, but relative to what it costs to put on the air, did we pick a good show? Did we execute on it well? And did we pay the right price to make it?
Coming up, Padma Lakshmi on elevating food across screens. This is Bloomberg.
Regional sports networks. There's a lot of, it's a business that seems to be collapsing. Leagues have sort of toyed around with, should we do something ourselves? Some teams are doing like local TV and streaming. How do you see that shaking out?
So I don't think I'm right on this, but my instincts keep telling me this is what's going to happen. Because if you remember the WWE, they launched their own network that had their own content and had their own pay-per-views. And it was kind of a smart, bold, ahead of its time move. And then they pivoted at the perfect time and they sold their content to, what was it, Peacock?
Yeah.
And that was really smart too, because they were able to leverage that number as high as possible. So they always zagged where the money was and when the opportunity was. I think the opportunity for the NBA with the local teams would be to own all that themselves.
DOJ or other authorities.
Could face bigger challenges next.
It was going to keep real World Cup. This is a three.
As the economic picture.
Covering the intersections of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and beyond.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Screen Time. I'm Caroline Hyde. You know Padma Lakshmi from her 2 decades hosting Top Chef. I spoke with her about her new show, Taste the Nation, and how she created a show highlighting the immigrant and indigenous experiences creating American food.
Yes, Taste the Nation is really a political show. You know, it's just disguising.
Did you mean it to be?
Yes, it's very, yes. I mean, I meant for you to see and not see everything you saw and not saw in Taste the Nation. I mean, as much as I am in front of the camera on that show, most of the work that I do on that show is behind the camera, with our stories, with our episode producers, with our research, writing the, voiceover, all of it. And I think that's been a real gift, to be able to hone muscles I didn't know I had, didn't know I wanted. And it's very gratifying. It's always really a privilege, and you just feel so lucky to be able to have an interest and a keen passion about something, and then actually be able to do it at work, at the level that you want to do. And I think that, to me, has been the greatest gift that Top Chef has given me, because I would never have Taste the Nation if I hadn't helped build Top Chef. And while Taste the Nation may be more aligned with my own interests or my own vision or taste level, Top Chef is also something that I'm really proud of, as far as what we've done in television and what we've done in food, and also what we've done just to affect how a generation of young people around the world, not just in America, think about their food.
How do you go and sell those stories? Whose ear do you need to gravitate towards or call towards you to say it needs to go on Hulu and it needs to go on in this particular manner, and how?
How do I sell it? Well, I mean, I do a lot of things like this, but I mean, not that much, but I think good programming finds its way. I mean, I sell it through building my social media platform. Like, I enjoy social media, but I don't have something to say every day, but I have to post every day. And so I'm learning how to do that.
Does that frustrate you?
It's time consuming.
Yeah.
Listen, for me, social media has been a very, very effective tool, not only to tell you about books that I've written or shows that I'm passionate about, but also to do my advocacy work.
Yes.
Whether it's with the United Nations or ACLU or Planned Parenthood or whatever. So for me, it was a megaphone that allowed me to talk about women's reproductive health. It was a megaphone that let me find my audience. I think it's really good for that because it's a way for you to communicate directly with the people who you think are your potential audience.
Just looking at your portfolio of businesses, it is about resilience, it's about pressure, it's about women. Like, so how does that come together how does it manifest in the deals that you're doing now?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I became increasingly passionate about after I retired, was acknowledging the fact that focus and this performance mindset was a huge asset that I had gained and that I had worked on and perfected for over 20 years. And now working through brands and founders, I just recently announced a collaboration with the Amman Hotel Group where I bring in the best talents in sports recovery and performance mindset in retreats and offering it there to their clientele. Our first one is actually in Phuket in February. So working through what that means, I mean, if you see the stats of Fortune 500 female CEOs, 80% of those women have played sport competitively through their life journey. And all those skill sets that they've built, to me, they were part of this first chapter, right? But how do they now apply to everything else I'm doing? And I'm so curious and interested in how I can bring that to the audience now and make it more mainstream and accessible.
But as we've grown over the last couple of decades, I think that we really do want to do things that we completely enjoy and that makes sense and that we're passionate about, you know, because it's very difficult to do something that you're really not that into. So I think my job is to identify a company or a product or a business and then helping to build the team that's around that. It's like with Skims, for example, I can use that. Kim thought about doing a shapewear company for 10 years. And Kim and I were in Cannes, and she was with Kendall, and they were going to do the red carpet. And I went up to get Kim, and she was leaning over a bathtub filled with warm water and tea bags, and she was dyeing her underwear and cutting it up. And I said, "What are you doing? You've got to be downstairs in 10 minutes." You know, she goes, "I got it," and they're blow drying the stuff. She goes, "This is just really what I want to do." And she did that for years. And then, you know, suddenly it was time to start this business. And so I asked the partners that we have now in Skims to come on board. Would they like to help us manufacture? Because I knew how to make makeup and beauty. I wasn't sure exactly how to make shapewear. You know, so I knew I had to find somebody who was great at manufacturing clothing and running that kind of a company. So I think that's a good example of how we are, you know, our ecosystem and our process works. You know, we identify a business, we, you know, get it funded and try to get it off the ground, and then we find the best team of people to put around that company.
The sale of ABC stations.
Yeah,
was about
ABC stations and network.
Correct.
Yeah.
And have you already submitted a bid, or you're looking to submit a bid?
Well, I submitted a bid. I texted it to Bob.
Okay. Okay.
Bob was on I'm sorry, he was on some other network, and Bob said he didn't see you know, linear networks as being core.
Yeah.
I said, got my mobile phone and said, "Here you go." And it was very straightforward. It's like, hey, whatever your EBITDA is, because, you know, I'm willing to pay you an 8X. So just open the books, let's go. But they're not ready to sell. He's not ready to sell. But I wanted to make it clear.
Why do you say he's not ready to sell?
Well, they've made that statement. They're not there. That's a complicated thing. They have to bifurcate that. They have to pull that out of the Disney system. That's a tough thing to do. And Bob is brilliant. He's excellent at what he does. When he's ready to sell, I just told him, you don't need to make more than one phone call. I'm your man. Call me. Everybody else is a waste of time. Call me. I'll get it done. What you want?
And also,
so, you know, listen, the money is easy. The money is very easy. There's plenty of money. There's $80 trillion out there floating around looking for, you know, great management. That's the real commodity. Great management. That's the commodity, right? There's $80 trillion out there. you don't have 80 trillion Byron Allens. Okay, you want your money back with a return? Call me. All right,
Also, too-
so I said to Bob, right, just to be really clear, I'm ready when you are, but it's not about the money. It's about certainty of close. And very few people can get a deal like that. ABC News, get that approved in Washington, D.C. And what you don't want to do is go sell it to somebody that can't get the deal closed, and now you're walking around in adult diapers for a year.
Coming up, how gaming is changing the face of entertainment. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Screen Time. I'm Ed Ludlow. Video game adaptations have been having a moment, from the Super Mario Brothers movie to HBO's The Last of Us. I spoke with Helen Chiang, Minecraft franchise head, and Brian Wright, Riot Games Chief Content Officer, on how video game IP is going to make the next leap from the gaming screen to the silver screen.
Yeah, I think gaming and entertainment go hand in hand. You know, when Minecraft started, it was a small independent game. It's evolved into a multi-billion-dollar franchise. We're really excited to expand into entertainment because we think of it as a great opportunity to reach new audiences and bring them into the franchise, even if they're not going to play the game.
There is a Minecraft movie. Well, there is a Minecraft movie.
There is.
Please expand.
It's under production right now. We're really excited to be working with Warner Brothers. We have the movie that's upcoming. We're working with Jason Momoa. It's a little bit delayed right now because of all of everything that's going on.
That's largely because of the pandemic.
Definitely.
Please continue.
But we're really excited because I think it's going to be just another expression of Minecraft that brings in a whole new audience into the franchise. We're hoping it's the start of many different entertainment offerings that we'll have with Minecraft.
Is the idea that whatever the end result that the movie looks like, that it's recognizable to kind of the generations of players that were playing Minecraft across different mediums?
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the challenges that we've had is, you know, Minecraft isn't known for the highest fidelity graphics. So as we were trying to imagine what the art style for this movie was, you know, I just saw some creative of that this week. I think we're really excited, and I think our fans are going to
Well, Jason Momoa might not sign on if you pixelate his face. But you've been through this, well, I'm assuming, I mean, I'm not an actor, but you've been through this process with Arcane. So Helen's going through it now. You've published, essentially. What was your learning from that, taking League of Legends and doing that?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting, and there was a lot of nerves at Riot pre-launch of Arcane because, you know, it was highly anticipated. They'd spent 6 years making it, and there's an extremely sort of like obsession with excellence at the company. But they didn't know, obviously, how it was going to land until it's out there in the world. And the response was overwhelming. The player community just like lost their minds. And the way to answer your question, just one question ago, which is like, what do I think makes for a good adaptation? For me, it really all comes back to character, and that's what Christian and Alex, who created, they were actually rioters, internal guys. One was from the Champion team, one was on the music team, and they actually created Arcane. But they focused the spotlight on a couple of champions, which we call them champions. Their characters, Jinx and Vi, really at the center of this thing, and they're not just like running around like blowing up things for the sake of blowing up things. Like there's reasons, like deep seated personal reasons.
There's a story.
There's a story, but the story didn't necessarily, whereas ours is not a narrative game, right? Unlike Naughty Dog, like Last of Us, that's a narrative game. Like League of Legends is a 5-on-5 MOBA. It's a 45-minute fantasy basketball matchup, right? So, but we do have supporting literature and supporting website and short stories that we publish that to give you a sense more of like what these characters and champions are up to. But they had a lot of license to go create that story and create that narrative, but they stayed deeply authentic to who those champions were.
Gaming and gamers have been probably one of our oldest, and for the longest time, most important verticals on our platform, including esports, but really across the full gamut there. A lot of what is consumed there is, video on demand, which is kind of the core essence of our YouTube platform. But increasingly, a lot of that is live. And our investment there has been twofold. One is distribution, so make sure that, esports gamers or gamers in general, or live streamers even more broadly, have access to audiences that they can easily be discovered. If you are a fan and one of your favorite esports or gamers is going live, we should be able to find it. And then the second is monetization capabilities. So insertion of ads and things like that, that's been a priority for us, but also alternative monetization. So our investment in things like super chat, super stickers,
subscriptions,
channel memberships, channel gifting, has actually, a lot of it has been born out of and driven through the gaming community.
And that's all from Bloomberg Screen Time.
You can find full interviews and panel discussions at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Caroline Hyde.
I'm Ed Ludlow, and this is Bloomberg.
In a very, very short period of time. Every single child, every single student, everywhere on this planet will actually have access to a tutor, someone who can help educate them one-to-one.
In their pockets.
Right, and we know that one-to-one education is, in fact, the one that has the best value and the best outcome. So the idea that you can have custom to who you are, to your language, male, female, young, old, relatable, funny, serious, Shakespeare, whoever you want, can be your tutor, your teacher that you can learn from, just seems to me like such a amazing transformation across the globe.
when people ask me, are you afraid of what might happen? I say, no, because of the goodness of the American people, the strength of our democracy, we will prevail. And my motto is, the flag is still there.
She's been the face of her party for a generation, spending 2 decades as the top House Democrat. Nancy Pelosi made history when she became the first female speaker in 2007. Until recently, the most powerful woman in U.S. politics, she's also faced years of attacks from Republicans, a campaign that escalated under former President Donald Trump.
We have an aberration in our country right now, but hopefully that won't last too much longer. But nonetheless, we still have to strive for unity. Sometimes you achieve it, sometimes you don't, but we have a responsibility to act in a bipartisan, unifying, transparent, accountable way.
In this episode of Leaders with LACWA, I traveled to Venice, where Nancy Pelosi was a special guest at the DVF Awards, a charity event recognizing women leaders. I asked her about the divisions in America, the Democrats' chances at next year's presidential election, the biggest geopolitical threats, and what she's learned from more than 35 years in public office.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for speaking to Bloomberg. You're one of the most recognizable and you're also one of the most admired politicians out there. What did you learn in the last 40 years about leadership in politics?
Well, I've learned a lot about leadership for a very long time, observing it in others, recognizing what is needed to get the job done. And I always define it in this way: know your why. You have to know why you're doing this, because you will be under attack, this for sure. Know your why, know what you're talking about, know how to get it done, think in a strategic way, and then that's all up here. And then also connect directly with people. If you can show them how important what you're advocating is and what you know you're talking about, so they trust your judgment, and you have a plan, you will have followers. You will be a leader.
Is it harder to do that in 2023 because of the divisions in America?
Well, we have to, our goal is not inch by inch, it's long term. And of course, it's always to bring people together. We have an aberration in our country right now, but hopefully that won't last too much longer. But nonetheless, we still have to strive for unity. Sometimes you achieve it, sometimes you don't, but we have a responsibility to act in a bipartisan, unifying, transparent, accountable way.
How do you think President Biden is doing right now?
I think he's doing great. I think President Biden is one of the best presidents in recent history for decades. Nobody has accomplished more since Lyndon Johnson or Franklin Roosevelt, whether it's our rescue package to rescue our country from the COVID and the rest, whether it's our infrastructure bill to build the country with good paying jobs, whether it's the science and CHIPS initiative to take us into the future, whether it's IRA, which is just remarkable to recognize the challenge of the climate crisis and to address it significantly in a bigger way than we ever have, in a bigger way than anyone ever has, but recognizing more needs to be done. And at the same time, recognizing our men and women in uniform and our commitment to them.
Speaker, is it frustrating, actually, that he has achieved a lot on paper, but he doesn't always seem to get the recognition from voters?
It is. It's sometimes hard to understand, but we don't agonize, we organize.
But
we just
why?
This is it. Well, please understand what is accomplished, what it means to you at your kitchen table. And people, most people I'm realizing aren't thinking about politics that much. They're thinking about their own challenges and the rest, and we have to have him relate to that. Now, nobody's better at that than he is. Joe Biden is Mr. Empathy. He cares deeply about people. He truly does. So I think he's a great president. I think he will be reelected. Elections are hard. They're called campaigns. That's a war term. But we'll be ready. And as I say, we don't agonize over what isn't, but organized for what will be.
Speaker, what's it been like for the Democrats to be the minority?
Not a good thing. I don't recommend minority at all. It is, but we're going to win it back. We have every confidence in that. I mean, they said we'd lose 40 seats, 30 seats at a minimum. We lost 5. That wasn't good enough. I wanted the majority, but we can win 5 seats, well, more than 5 seats back.
How have you changed as a politician?
Well, I think
Your
I've
fights?
mellowed out, become gentle.
Really?
I don't know. No, I pretty much knew what I was getting into. I didn't seek running for leadership. People encouraged me to do so, and I knew my why. I knew what was at stake. I knew how to get the job done, and I knew how to draw people together. And the same advice I give others, I did myself. Women have intuition. People don't talk about it so much, but when I was young, that was what people talked about. Intuition is a very valuable thing in leadership. And when people say to me they want to run for president or governor or mayor or even leadership in the Congress, I say, but understand you're going from a deductive reasoning of how do we get this legislation passed to intuitive. There's a problem. You must act. The more time you don't, the fewer your options are. So be ready. Know your subject. Have good judgment. Be wise.
But Speaker Pelosi, you stood up against President Trump many times, and it's gotten you all in spots of trouble. Are people more afraid now of taking him on?
I didn't stand up to him many times. I stood up to him once. It lasted a very long time. People are afraid of him now because, as you see, his desperation. In other words, it's one thing to say we have a disagreement on policy, okay, and we do. We have another thing to say that truth is not prevailing. But it's another thing to say there's a recognition of all the violations of the rule of law, that any person is above the law, undermining the press, which is the freedom of the press is the guardian of the gate of freedom. So he was clever. Undermine the press, undermine the rule of law. I'm above the law. So seeing the length to which he will go, of course, is more frightening. He's a threat to our democracy, but we intend to win.
He's so popular with the voters.
Well, he's popular among his group.
Are you surprised at how popular he is with?
Well, I'm never surprised. It's not a word I use. I just don't use. It's interesting to see how there's a certain element of the population who will just go for him. They're people we would probably never get. They don't share our values in terms of respect for the dignity and worth of every person and the rest. But there are some who are supporting him who are just afraid. And that's to be respected. So I respect all of the people of America. And when people ask me, are you afraid of what might happen? I said, no, because of the goodness of the American people, the strength of our democracy, we will prevail. And my motto is the flag is still there, as we say in our national anthem.
Is there a Republican president, a candidate that you could live with?
I'm not into Republicans. I'm into the Democrats. And hopefully the Republican Party can find a candidate that America can live with. I say to the Republicans all the time, take back your party. The Republican Party is a great party. You've done great things for our country. You're not a cult to a thug. You're a great, grand, old party. And recapture that, because America needs a strong Republican Party. A strong Democratic Party too, but strong Republican Party. So hopefully, as soon as we get through this, shall we say, cancerous situation that we're in, the malignancy of Trump, they will emerge in a strong way with the leadership that I know is there in the Republican Party.
Up next, Nancy Pelosi's harsh assessment on China and why she thinks the world's 2 biggest economies must cooperate on climate change.
We don't have shared values, but we have a shared planet, and we have to work with the Chinese to save the planet, because they're now, I think, the biggest emitter. If not us, they're second, and they're part of the solution in all of this.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials, find people, analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
Always on the heartbeat of the tech
spread across global markets.
The real-time data aspect is going to be important.
We're going to bring you expert analysis on that. Sure.
Don't miss Bloomberg's interview with the
From Taiwan to tech curves, human rights concerns to COVID, China's relationship with the U.S. has been rocky. In recent months, Washington has sent several high-profile officials to Beijing, seeking to improve ties. But will anything change? I continue the conversation with Nancy Pelosi, a longtime critic of the Chinese government.
When you look at geopolitics, what scares you the most?
There are three things. One is security. Security, 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 so important. Security. Secondly is economics. How do we relate economically? Because that's the strength of all of our countries, to do so in a shared manner. And governance. Governance. What is the strength of the democracy in your country? How do you treat people and respect them? What is the integrity of your economic system? So those are the how we relate as Americans going abroad. On security, what is happening in Ukraine is a challenge to democracy, not just there, not just in the EU, NATO countries, but really to the world. And what a tribute to democracy that the courage of the Ukrainian people are. What's frightening is that Putin does not share any values of democracy, of justice, of respect for the lives of people, concern for children or anything. And he's frightening, but it's doubly frightening as a person like the former president who thinks that's okay. Well, isn't that sad? But it's so sad and it's so extreme that it's everything to me is not frightening, but an opportunity.
An opportunity, but when you look at China, for example, if you look at what the U.S. has been doing with China and how they should treat China going forward.
Well, China's a big country, and so are we, and we have to find an accommodation on how we treat each other. But in terms of the three things I named, security, China has been a violator of transferring technology of weapons of mass destruction to rogue countries, A. B, in terms of economics, they've been violated almost every trade standard of access, of piracy, obeying WTA rules and the rest. And in terms of governance, what need I tell you, Hong Kong, Tibet, Uyghurs, threat to Taiwan, and the rest. So we don't have shared values, but we have a shared planet, and we have to work with the Chinese to save the planet, because they're now, I think, the biggest emitter. If not us, they're second, and they're part of the solution in all of this. I've been to China as much as I have for 35, since Tiananmen Square. How many years is that? 34 years. Been a strong critic of China in so many respects. Security, economics, and governance, still we have to work together in certain areas, and we have to find those. I don't think we find them by rewarding them. I think we find them by mutual discussion about how we can go forward.
But is that bringing them closer? So closer,
that's up to them.
Actually, relationship with the U.S. so that maybe it becomes a better working relationship, also economically.
Our trade deficit with China is an immorality. When you see the fuss that was made a long time ago about Japan was like 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1 sometimes of their imports into our country versus our exports to theirs. With China, it's more than double that. And when I first started criticizing China about the three areas I said, the trade deficit was $5 billion a year. And people said to me, oh, you can't make a fuss over that because the peaceful evolution is going to lead to that trade is going to lead to this, that, and the other thing. Well, now the trade deficit with China is not $5 billion a year. It's $5 billion a week. And we gave it to them. They used that money for their foreign exchange to go into other countries, buy up support and the rest of that. And we were accomplices to that. And I've always criticized our policy toward China in that regard.
How often do you get asked about your trip to Taiwan?
Not enough. I love talking about it, as a matter of fact.
Do you think it's changed something in the way that the U.S. and China speak to each other?
Well, there's no, President Xi has always criticized my criticizing him. My colleagues, men, senators, and the rest had been to Taiwan right before me. He never said a word. Did you know that? Did you know that? No, he never said a word. But I have been sort of outspoken about U.S.-China relations, and with a love for China, with a love for the Chinese people. You know, when I was a little girl, they said if you dig a hole deep enough in the sand at the beach, you will reach China. So we felt that we were all connected. So it isn't with any dislike for things Chinese or people Chinese. It's about what? A genocide of the Uyghurs, a suppression of democracy in Hong Kong, while promising one country, two systems, taking down of the culture, the language, and the religion of the people in Tibet, the threat to Taiwan, the threat to democracy, not democracy, but threat to freedom of speech.
What do you think will happen with Taiwan?
We recognize China. Our visit did nothing to alter that. And we have communiques, laws that govern our relationship with China and our relationship with Taiwan, which are very specific. And we are committed to helping Taiwan defend itself should they be attacked. We don't want any change in status unless it were to be done peacefully, but no aggression from either side.
Speaker, we're seeing also a downturn in terms of the economy in China, which could impact the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Do you think President Xi is losing control of it?
We and other countries decided to ride this tiger, and we poured money. You know, we just bought everything they had to sell. We increased their, and then when their economy is in trouble, we're like, oh, look, it has an impact on us. Surprise, 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 surprise. But it's not a, we don't want any country to suffer economically because people suffer economically. But understand this, it's a centralized economy.
Yeah.
It's a one-man show. It isn't anything about values, governance, integrity, certainly nothing to do with democratic freedoms. I'm not even talking about a democracy. I'm talking about establishing a democracy, but we're talking about, I mean, this is pretty complete in terms of Xi. He is a step backward from President Hu, by the way.
But Speaker, at the same time, the economy is actually falling. So is he, I mean, how do you read that?
We don't wish a failing economy on anyone, but we don't say, oh my gosh. No, some people have an attitude, I profited for it then, and now I'm not. But it was worth it to me to just go along with the whole China thing. Money has been really a sad factor in this because from the start, corporate America just said, we don't care about human rights. I don't think they mostly ever have. They don't care about human rights. And the security pieces of it, they should have. But on the trade stuff, most small businesses that would want to trade to China were completely cut out because the Chinese said, if you want to sell to us, you must manufacture here. And if you manufacture here, we want to see your designs. And if we have your designs, we don't need you anymore. And by the way, you're not selling here. You can compete with us in the global market.
Up next, Nancy Pelosi on why artificial intelligence can't be a free-for-all.
We need guardrails, we need standards and the rest so that this double-edged sword doesn't do harm, but instead does good.
probably go down in history as one of, if not the largest financial crime ever.
I cannot imagine a scenario where $8 billion just disappears.
Bankman-Fried has pled not guilty to multiple fraud charges.
Sam was just too important in the crypto community.
When someone says, I'm going to give $1 billion in the next 2 years, like that catches everybody's attention.
As time went on, their ideas got like weirder and weirder.
I don't think he even had almost a conception at some point that it was wrong or right. I think he just had the mentality that he has to win.
This committee will not stop until we uncover the full truth behind the collapse of FTX.
So, Mark.
Are you in? I'm in.
I'm in.
We're in. Will this be the last of its kind? No. This is the nature of capitalism. Get over it.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
You can see the massive gains for the OG crypto coin.
The breakout we have all perhaps long awaited finally realized. We'll see if it sticks.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto, the people.
There's no question this industry is composed of some bad actors and some good actors.
The transactions.
Volumes have surpassed $24 billion per day.
And the technology.
Stop talking about the technology, start demonstrating the utility.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays.
Artificial intelligence, the buzzword that's dominating headlines and creating a frenzy in the tech world. But the dangers of misinformation and fears of potential threats to privacy, security, and livelihoods have forced governments to move to regulate it. It's a task lawmakers in the U.S. are still grappling with. I continue the conversation with Nancy Pelosi.
Speaker, how much time do you spend thinking about Elon Musk? I mean, he's a force.
No, yeah, well, I do think he's a force in terms of technology, especially relating to Ukraine, but I don't spend too much time. We have a lot of strong leaders. I come from an area that is very, shall we say, technologically on the move. Yeah. And every year since I've been in office or even before, they have said to me, you ain't seen nothing yet. So we don't know what is next, but I don't spend too much time thinking about him.
In terms of AI or technology, I mean, you
AI
represent
is a double-edged sword, yeah. And that's in my district, yeah. Too, in San Francisco. And the people that I know who are working in it, who care about our country, know that it's a double-edged sword, that we need guardrails, we need standards and the rest, so that this double-edged sword doesn't do harm, but instead does good, and it can do some good. But right now we have a strike in the creativity industry, writers and actors and the rest, and there has to be respect for the creativity that they have, and AI has an impact, could have an impact on that, and we have to recognize that, write laws to respect that. In our Constitution, we have respect for copyright.
But do we need to regulate AI? Just should we regulate Elon Musk?
Built-in protections.
Okay.
And built-in protections, yeah, we do.
And social media? I mean,
well,
Elon
social
Musk
media
is
has been a double-edged sword. It's
Yeah.
done tremendous damage while it's done tremendous good. And that's really sad. But who would want to reverse the ability to have health technology and education and commerce and family communication and all the good things that spring from it. Yeah. While at the same time seeing filthy, dirty stuff being presented to our children and the rest of that. So there has to be a way for families to know how to protect their children. I myself think that there's a regulation in the law that could be changed to protect children. That's an ongoing fight we have with the technology industry.
But when we talk about leadership, it's also, I guess, about grooming the next generation. Is there anyone that you would support in the Democratic field
for president?
For president or for senator?
Well, I'm supporting Adam Schiff for senator from California. We have 40 million people in our state. Our senator, who is very revered, Senator Feinstein, has been a champion in California and in the country, whether you're talking about assault weapon ban. She has been the leader in passing legislation for that. whether you're talking about protecting our natural resources, whether it's water, forest. And so, again, it's a big state. It's the fourth economy in the world, and we need full strength in the Senate.
There have been younger Democrats, saying that senior senator should criticizing her. Right,
yeah,
for some of the things.
But welcome to our world. People criticize everybody.
But should they not criticize if you're
Well,
going
they can do whatever
united?
they want. It's a free world, but they don't. And I can criticize them for criticizing her, because the fact is she's